So here we go. Do people who have never heard of Christianity still go to hell when they die? Great question. Man, I love this question. There is a lot to unpack here on this question. And again, I'm deliberately going to spend a lot of time on this question because I think it's very important. Because there are two kind of frameworks to look at this question. You might get this question from an unbeliever, or you might get this question from a believer. So let me first address the unbeliever part to this question. So if an unbeliever asks a question like this, they very well could be what the hidden assumption is God fair? Is God being actually fair? Even if you're a believer, you're asking that question, is God fair? Now, if you are an unbeliever, the question that I would ask that person is, well, if you if you have concerns over God's fairness, by what standard are you judging God's fairness? By what standard are you using to judge whether God is being fair or not? Because if it's their own standard and God has a higher standard, then it would make sense that we be going on God's standard. So in order for an unbeliever to even ask this question, they have to assume that there is a standard to which God must conform to. But that is not true about God. God doesn't conform to any standard. God himself, his very nature, is the standard of good. So everything God does is good, not because he says it, or not that the things that he says is good, it's because he is good. By his very nature, he's good. So that's the first thing I wanted to get you to understand, that a non-believer would have to, you need God to even begin to answer the question as an unbeliever. Now, for us as believers, like this kind of, this kind of troubles us a little bit. What about people who haven't heard? So a couple of thoughts on this. Number one is that here's the question that I would pose to you. What if there are no such people? What if there are no such people? If we read Romans 1, what Romans 1 tells us, Romans chapter 1, verse 18, I'm gonna semi-quote it here. Actually, see, I got my little Bible here. Hopefully it works. But Romans 1, verse 18, I've read this for the high school students, and I think it's appropriate that I would read it now with this question. All right. Romans 1:18. All right. My device is not working, and that's fine. But, um, anyways, Romans 1, verse 18, I'll paraphrase it. I'll paraphrase it really, really quick. So it basically says, for the wrath of God is being revealed against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of people who suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. For his eternal attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have clearly been seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without an excuse. So again, I pose the question, what if there are no such people? This begins to address the question of what's called general revelation and special revelation. What general revelation is that, and can you go ahead and go to Romans 2? Because I'm going to go back to Romans. I'm going to go to Romans 2. I don't know where it is, but I'll find it when we get there. What general revelation is this idea that God has revealed himself to absolutely everybody through creation and through our consciousness. Every single person has a conscience to know what is right and what is wrong. So God has revealed himself in that way. And then special revelation is when God reveals himself through the Bible, through his word, or through his spirit, or through Jesus Christ himself. So that's special revelation. Everyone has gotten general revelation. Absolutely every single person in the world has gotten general revelation. But it's ironic that Jesus says to go throughout the world, proclaim the gospel to all nations so that they can get the special revelation of Jesus Christ. Having general revelation, having general revelation just of creation and through conscience may or may not, probably will not bring you to saving faith in Jesus Christ. However, I will say this though, but it kind of gets back to the original question. So what if someone has this general revelation and they're thinking like, man, like I know that there's a God out there. I don't know what to do. Maybe they've never heard of Jesus. Here's one thing that you will find. Let me ask you guys this, just a quick poll, okay? Here's a quick poll. I want everyone to think about a person that they know who is an unbeliever that you wish to come to Christ. You really want them to come to Christ. Think about that person. Just think about it for a second. Now, what I want you to do, if that person you are thinking about is on a relentless pursuit of truth, they are giving everything they can to find God, to find out about God, or if they're just on a relentless pursuit of truth, raise your hand if it's that person. Okay. Now, what if, I think we got one hand. Now, the person that you're thinking about, what if they're kind of more like kind of nonchalant, they're more apathetic, or even hostile to the faith, or even like they don't really care? Raise your hand if the person you think about is more like apathetic or hostile. So a whole lot more hands. That's great. So here's the point that I'm making. God, when we truly seek God, God will make a way for the gospel to reach you. We have examples of this in the Bible. That I think about Cornelius. Cornelius in the Bible was a Roman senator, I believe, or centurion. So he was in charge of soldiers, and the Bible described him as an upright man. An upright man. He had not received the gospel. However, what God did was give Peter a dream that ultimately led to him going to Cornelius. God will get you the gospel. And then another story, I've heard this from a Christian leader before. I forget his name, but I will never forget this story. This leader was on a mission trip in a Middle East country that is absolutely closed to the gospel. They're if you preach the gospel there, that you will get arrested. I think would be either like maybe Iran or maybe Saudi Arabia. But he said they were about to, he said him and his wife, they were about to run out of gas, and there was only like one gas station near. And when they got to the gas station, there was a guy at the door with an AK-47, an automatic rifle. And that's where they needed to go pay. And he was there in the name of Jesus Christ. And so they were really nervous. They didn't, they ended up getting the gas, and then the guy told his wife, I really believe I'm supposed to give this guy a Bible. And so his wife was like, you better be sure you're hearing from God. And so I'm stumbling because I'm trying to think of who the person's name is. It is slipping me right now. The missionary isn't important. The story is. He said, so they said a little prayer in the car. He went up and he gave the guy with the AK-47 the Bible. He said, I believe I'm supposed to give this to you. And then he came back. When he went back, headed back to his car. A few seconds later, as he was walking back, he heard a loud thud on the ground. The guy had just completely passed out. And they eventually woke him up, and what he said was, he said, I had been having a dream about this person of Jesus. And he said that God told me to stand here at this gas station until someone gave me a Bible. And he couldn't handle it. He couldn't stand up. He just completely failed. So God, if you are truly seeking God, he will find you. And so that's why I asked the question, are there such people? Are there such people who truly haven't heard? And if they truly haven't heard, are they truly pursuing truth? One last thought on this, and this is very interesting because I hear this question a lot from like European. I listen to a lot of like European leaders, and this question comes out a lot in Europe and a lot in America. In other nations that are not democratic, this is not even a question. It's not even a question for them. They understand a little bit more because maybe they're in a theocracy or or a monarchy or something like that. It's very important to remember that God's kingdom is not a democracy. It's a kingdom. He has laws. He has rules, and it could be here. And hear me now. I want to make sure I understand this so you don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. So I'll talk about heaven for a minute because the question was about hell. I'll talk about heaven for a minute. Very briefly, what God explains to us is that those who believe in Him and they do who are believers in Christ, we are still judged at the end, but we're judged on the righteous things that we do, so that we can have benefits in eternity. So that's one of the reasons why we should do things, because we get maybe we get a larger mansion or a bigger crown in heaven. Whatever we get, we're going to lay it down at the feet of the Father anyway. But there is more rewards for obedience in heaven. So when God looks at us, He's going to be looking to see all the good things that we've done. Oh my goodness, He's going to be looking at all these things so He can give us a reward for eternity. In the same way, if there are greater and greater rewards for obedience to God, it stands to reason, and again, looking at Satan and his followers, there are greater and greater punishments for disobedience. Could God have ordained the world in such a way so that the people who never hear the gospel would have rejected it anyway? So in God's grace, He could be preventing people from getting worse and worse judgment from rejecting His Son by them not hearing. That's just